The dust from the stagecoach hadn't settled when Beatrice Dawson stumbled down the steps with nothing but a worn carpetbag and a letter of employment she hoped was still valid. Her heart pounding so hard she could barely hear the driver curse as he threw down her trunk and drove off without waiting for payment she couldn't give anyway. She stood in the middle of Greeley, Colorado, squinting against the afternoon sun of August 1878, wondering if running from Philadelphia had been courage or cowardice. But knowing either way she couldn't go back to a life where her stepfather's debts had nearly bought her as a wife to a man 3 times her age who collected women like some men collected cattle. The saloon across the street had a sign advertising a restaurant attached, and Beatrice's stomach reminded her she hadn't eaten since yesterday morning. She clutched her bag tighter and crossed the dusty street, dodging a wagon and earning a tip of the hat from its driver. Inside the restaurant, the smell of fried chicken and fresh bread made her dizzy with hunger. A woman with graying hair looked up from wiping down tables. "Help you, miss. I was told there might be work here. I wrote to a Mrs. Henderson about a position as a cook." Beatrice pulled out the crumpled letter, its edges soft from being read and reread during the long journey west. The woman's face softened. "Oh, honey, Mrs. Henderson passed 2 months ago. Heart gave out while she was kneading bread, poor soul. Her husband sold the place to me and moved back east to live with his daughter." Beatrice felt the floor tilt beneath her. She'd spent every cent she had on the train ticket and stagecoach fare. "I understand. Thank you for your time. Wait now." The woman gestured to a chair. "Sit down before you fall down. You look half-starved. I'm Millicent Cooper and I run this place now. Can you actually cook, or was that letter just a way to get out here?" "I can cook." Beatrice sat, her legs grateful for the support. "My mother taught me before she died. I worked in a boarding house kitchen for 3 years in Philadelphia." Millicent disappeared into the kitchen and returned with a plate of chicken, potatoes, and greens. "Eat first. We'll talk after you've got some food in you. Can't make decisions on an empty stomach." Beatrice wanted to cry at the kindness but forced herself to eat slowly, though everything in her wanted to shovel the food down like a starving dog. Millicent sat across from her, studying her with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "You running from the law or from a man?" "Neither. From a situation that would have made me wish I was dead." "That's honest, at least. I do need help in the kitchen. Previous girl ran off with a cowboy 2 weeks ago and I've been doing it all myself. But I can't pay much, and room and board comes out of wages." "You'd have a cot in the back room and 3 meals a day. Interested?" "Yes." Beatrice didn't hesitate. "Thank you. I'll work hard, I promise." "I believe you will. Finish eating, then I'll show you where things are. We've got the dinner rush starting in about an hour, and Saturday nights get busy with the ranch hands coming to town." Beatrice had barely gotten her bearings in the kitchen when the orders started coming in. She worked alongside Millicent, her hands remembering the rhythms of cooking even as her mind raced with exhaustion and relief. The heat from the stove made sweat run down her back, but she kept moving, kept working, proving she deserved this unexpected mercy. The evening rush finally slowed around 9 o'clock. Beatrice was washing the last of the pots when Millicent touched her shoulder. "You did good tonight. Real good. Get some sleep. We start breakfast at 5. The cot in the back room was narrow, and the blanket thin, but Beatrice lay down fully clothed and fell into sleep like falling into a well. The next weeks blurred together in a haze of early mornings and late nights, flour dust and bacon grease, the constant heat of the stove and the endless washing of dishes. Beatrice learned the rhythms of Greeley, the ranchers and cowboys and railroad men who came in for meals, the gossip that flowed as freely as the coffee. She kept her head down and her hands busy, saving every penny Millicent paid her, building a small buffer against catastrophe. It was a Thursday afternoon in early September when Austin Wells walked into the restaurant with 3 other cowboys, all of them dusty from the trail and loud with the relief of men who'd finished a hard job. Beatrice glanced up from rolling out pie dough and found herself looking into eyes the color of summer sky before a storm. He was tall and lean, with dark hair that needed cutting and a jaw shadowed with stubble. When he smiled at something one of his companions said, the expression transformed his whole face, and Beatrice felt something shift in her chest before she looked back down at her dough, annoyed with herself for noticing. 4 plates of whatever's hot, one of the men called out. And coffee strong enough to strip paint. Millicent took their order while Beatrice filled plates with beef stew and cornbread, her hands steady even as she felt the blue-eyed cowboy's gaze on her. She brought the plates out herself, setting them down without meeting anyone's eyes. "Thank you kindly, miss." The blue-eyed cowboy's voice was deep and warm, with a Texas drawl that softened the edges of his words. Beatrice nodded and retreated to the kitchen, but she found herself listening to the cowboys' conversation, the easy camaraderie of men who worked together and trusted each other. Their voices carried through the doorway as they talked about the cattle drive they'd just finished, the ornery bull that had tried to kill them all, the river crossing that had nearly gone wrong. "Austin Dam near drowned pulling that calf out of the current," one of them said. "Craziest thing I ever saw, him diving in without even taking off his boots." "Couldn't let the calf drown," Austin replied, and Beatrice could hear the shrug in his voice. "Besides, I've swum in worse." They finished their meal and left, Austin pausing at the door to look back at the kitchen. Beatrice pretended she wasn't watching from behind the shelves, but their eyes met for a brief moment before he settled his hat and walked out into the sunlight. "That's Austin Wells," Millicent said, making Beatrice jump. "Works for the Triple Creek Ranch north of town. Good man, from what I hear. Doesn't drink much, doesn't gamble, sends money back to his sister in Texas. His kind are rare out here. I wasn't asking." Beatrice turned back to her pie dough, rolling it with more force than necessary. "No, but you were noticing. Nothing wrong with that. You're young and he's handsome and single. Could do a lot worse. I'm not looking." Beatrice cut the dough and fitted it into pie tins, her movements precise and practiced. "I came out here to work and build a life, not to chase after cowboys. Sometimes life chases after us whether we're ready or not." Millicent patted her shoulder and went back to the dining room, leaving Beatrice alone with her thoughts and her pies. Austin came back 2 days later, this time alone. It was mid-afternoon, the quiet time between lunch and dinner when Beatrice was preparing vegetables for the evening meal. Millicent had gone to the mercantile, leaving Beatrice in charge. She looked up when the door opened, her hands full of potatoes and a paring knife. "We're between meals," she said, then recognized him and felt her face warm. "But I can make you something if you're hungry. I don't want to trouble you." Austin took off his hat, turning it in his hands. "But if you've got coffee and maybe some bread, I'd be grateful." "That's no trouble." Beatrice washed her hands and poured coffee from the pot that was always hot on the stove. She sliced thick pieces from the morning's bread and brought it all to the table where Austin had sat down. "Butter's there, and jam if you want it." "Thank you, Miss Dawson." "Beatrice Dawson." "Austin Wells." He held out his hand, and after a moment's hesitation, Beatrice shook it. His palm was calloused and warm, his grip gentle but firm. "Pleasure to meet you properly." Beatrice nodded and returned to her potatoes, aware of him behind her, the quiet sounds of him eating and drinking. After a few minutes, he spoke again. "You're new to Greeley." "Is it that obvious, small town? New faces stand out, especially ones as pretty as yours." Beatrice's knife slipped and nearly cut her thumb. That's forward. Sorry. My sister always says I've got no sense when it comes to talking to women. Austin's voice held genuine apology. I just meant you've got a kind face. You look like someone who's weathered storms and came out still believing in sunshine. Despite herself, Beatrice turned to look at him. He was watching her with those blue eyes, his expression open and honest. That's either very perceptive or very presumptuous. Maybe both. I've been told I think too much for a cowboy. Austin smiled, and again Beatrice felt that shift in her chest. Truth is, I came back because I wanted to meet you proper. Felt rude being served by you and not even knowing your name. My mama raised me better than that. Your mama in Texas was. She passed when I was 16. Fever took her quick. Austin's face shadowed for a moment. My sister Sarah raised me and my younger brother after that. She's married now, got a little ranch with her husband. I send them money when I can, help keep the place running. That's good of you. Beatrice turned back to her potatoes, but something in her had softened toward this cowboy with his honest eyes and his devotion to his family. They fell into a comfortable silence, broken only by the sound of Beatrice's knife and Austin's cup being set down. When Millicent returned, Austin stood and paid for his coffee and bread, leaving a generous tip. At the door, he paused. Would it be all right if I came back sometime? For coffee, I mean. Beatrice met his eyes. It's a restaurant. Anyone can come in for coffee. That's not really what I'm asking. I know. Beatrice held his gaze. Yes, it would be all right. Austin's smile could have lit the whole room. He settled his hat and walked out, and Millicent immediately appeared at Beatrice's elbow. That boy is smitten. Don't be ridiculous. We just met. I've been watching people fall in love in this restaurant for 30 years. I know what I'm seeing. Millicent picked up a potato and started peeling it. Question is, what are you going to do about it? Nothing. I'm not looking for a husband. Why not? The question was simple, but the answer was complicated. Beatrice set down her knife and looked at her hands, red from hot water and rough from work. Because I don't know how to be a wife to any man. My mother died when I was 12. I raised myself after that, learned to cook in other people's kitchens, worked for my own keep. I never learned the things wives are supposed to know. I can't sew beyond mending. I don't know how to keep a proper house. And I've got opinions about things women aren't supposed to have opinions about. I'm 22 years old and I've never been courted, never been kissed, never been anything but a pair of working hands. What would I do with a husband, especially one like him? Maybe you'd figure it out together. Millicent's voice was gentle. Love isn't about knowing everything beforehand. It's about finding someone who makes you want to learn. Beatrice didn't answer, but her mind wouldn't let go of the image of Austin's smile, the warmth in his voice when he talked about his family, the way he'd apologized for speaking too forward. She'd spent so long protecting herself, building walls against a world that saw women as commodities to be bought and sold. The idea of letting someone in, of being vulnerable, terrified her more than anything had in years. Austin came back the next afternoon, and the afternoon after that. Each time he ordered coffee and whatever Beatrice had baked that day, sitting at the same table and talking with her when she had time between tasks. He told her about the ranch, about the cattle and horses he worked with, about the vast Colorado sky and the way the mountains looked at sunrise. She found herself telling him about Philadelphia, about the boarding house and the endless fog and the way she'd felt trapped by cobblestones and coal smoke. "Don't you miss it?" Austin asked one day, his coffee growing cold as he listened to her. "The city, I mean. All the people and the shops and the theaters. Not even a little bit." Beatrice was making bread, her hands working the dough with practiced efficiency. "I felt like I was suffocating there. Out here I can breathe. Everything's so big and open. It's frightening sometimes, but it's also wonderful. I know what you mean. I left Texas because I needed room to be myself, not who everyone expected me to be. Austin watched her hands as she shaped the dough into loaves. You're good at that. I've made about 10,000 loaves of bread in my life. I ought to be good at it by now. Would you teach me sometime? Beatrice looked up, surprised. Why would a cowboy need to know how to make bread? Because I get tired of biscuits that could double as bullets, and I'd like to be able to feed myself something decent when I'm out on the range. Austin grinned. Plus, I like watching you work. You've got this look of concentration, like the bread dough is the most important thing in the world right then. It is while I'm making it. If you don't pay attention, you end up with bricks instead of bread. Beatrice covered the loaves with a cloth to let them rise. All right. Next time you come on a slow day, I'll teach you. That lesson happened on a Wednesday afternoon in late September, when the air had turned crisp and the aspens on the distant mountains glowed gold. Millicent had taken the afternoon off for a church meeting, leaving Beatrice and Austin alone in the kitchen. He'd washed his hands 3 times at Beatrice's insistence, making her laugh at his exaggerated care. Now you look like you're about to perform surgery. Well, you're particular. I don't want to get yelled at. Austin stood next to her at the work table, close enough that she could smell horse and leather and clean sweat. It should have been unpleasant, but somehow wasn't. Beatrice talked him through measuring flour and salt, warming the water and mixing in the yeast. You can't rush it. Everything has to be the right temperature, the right texture. Bread has its own time, and you have to respect that. Austin's hands were clumsy at first, too rough with the delicate dough, but he learned quickly. Beatrice found herself guiding his movements, her hands over his, showing him how to fold and press, developing the gluten that would give the bread structure. The kitchen was warm and quiet, filled with the yeasty smell of the dough and something else, something electric and unspoken that made Beatrice's breath catch in her throat. Like this? Austin's voice was soft, his attention focused on the dough beneath their joined hands. Yes. You're getting it. Beatrice stepped back, breaking the contact, suddenly aware of how intimate the moment had become. Now we let it rise. Takes about an hour. They sat at the table with coffee, the dough resting under its cloth, and Austin looked at her with those blue eyes that seemed to see straight through to her bones. Can I ask you something personal? You can ask. I might not answer. Fair enough. Austin turned his coffee cup in his hands. Why'd you really come out west? You said you were running from a situation. If that's too personal, you can tell me to mind my own business. Beatrice considered lying or deflecting, but something in his face invited honesty. My stepfather owed money to a man. A lot of money. The man offered to forgive the debt in exchange for me, as his wife. She said the word like it tasted bitter. My stepfather was actually considering it, so I took the money I'd saved and bought a ticket west. I figured being alone out here was better than being owned back there. Austin's jaw tightened, a muscle jumping in his cheek. How old was this man? 58. With 2 previous wives who both died young. People said they died of broken hearts, but I think they died of being broken by him. Beatrice wrapped her hands around her own coffee cup, seeking warmth against the chill of the memory. I know what you're thinking, that I should have found another way, that running was cowardly. Maybe you're right. I'm not thinking that at all. Austin's voice was hard. I'm thinking you were brave. I'm thinking you saved your own life. And I'm thinking that man and your stepfather ought to be horsewhipped for even considering such a thing. The fierce protectiveness in his tone surprised Beatrice. You don't even know me. I know enough. I know you're strong and smart, and you work harder than anyone I've ever met. I know you're kind, because I've watched you with Millicent and the customers. I know you laugh at my terrible jokes even when they're not funny, and I know that when you smile, really smile, it's like the sun coming out from behind clouds." Austin leaned forward, his eyes intense. "I know I want to keep knowing you if you'll let me." Beatrice's heart was racing, her carefully built walls crumbling. "Austin, I don't know how to do this. I've never been courted. I don't know the rules or the steps or any of it. I'm not like other women. I'm too independent, too opinionated, too rough around the edges. I don't know how to be what a man wants. I don't want you to be anything but yourself." Austin reached across the table and took her hand, his calloused fingers gentle around hers. "And I don't care about rules or steps. We'll figure it out together if you're willing." The words hung in the air between them, a promise and a question all at once. Beatrice looked at their joined hands, at the contrast between his tanned skin and her flour-dusted fingers, and felt something give way inside her chest. "I'm terrified," she whispered. "Me too." Austin smiled, soft and real. "But I think the best things are always a little bit scary at first." The bread rose and they baked it together, Austin watching carefully as Beatrice showed him how to test if the oven was hot enough, how to know when the loaves were done by the sound they made when tapped. When they pulled the golden loaves from the oven, filling the kitchen with the most wonderful smell, Austin looked as proud as if he'd struck gold. "I made bread. Actual bread that looks like bread." "You did." Beatrice felt herself smiling, genuinely smiling in a way she hadn't in longer than she could remember. "And it's going to taste good too, I promise." They cut into one of the loaves while it was still warm, spreading butter that melted into the tender crumb. Austin took a bite and closed his eyes. "This is the best thing I've ever tasted. It's just bread. It's bread I made with you. That makes it different." Austin opened his eyes and looked at her with such warmth that Beatrice felt her breath catch. "Thank you for teaching me. Thank you for wanting to learn." Millicent returned an hour later to find them sitting at the table, talking and laughing over the remains of the bread. She took one look at them and smiled, saying nothing but everything in her expression as she shooed Austin out so they could prepare for the dinner service. After that day, Austin's visits became a fixture of Beatrice's routine. He came by several times a week, always when he could spare the time from the ranch, always bringing small gifts that showed he'd been thinking of her. A bunch of wildflowers picked on the range. A smooth stone from the creek that was perfectly round and fit in the palm of her hand. A book of poetry he'd bought from the general store, the pages already worn from where he'd read it trying to find verses that reminded him of her. October arrived with cold nights and bright days, the sky so blue it hurt to look at directly. Beatrice had been in Greeley for 2 months and felt more at home than she ever had in Philadelphia. Millicent had given her a raise and more responsibilities, trusting her to handle the kitchen alone on slower days. She'd made friends with some of the other women in town, earned a reputation for her pies that made people place orders days in advance. And there was Austin, constant as the sunrise, showing up with his easy smile and his patient heart, courting her with a gentleness that made her walls crumble a little more each day. One Saturday evening, after the dinner rush had ended and Millicent had retired to her rooms above the restaurant, Austin appeared at the back door of the kitchen. Beatrice was finishing the washing up, her arms deep in soapy water. "You're here late. I wanted to see you. We leave tomorrow morning for a week, driving a herd to Denver. Wanted to say goodbye properly." Austin came into the kitchen, his hat in his hands. "Also wanted to ask if you'd go somewhere with me, right now if you're done working." "Where?" "It's a surprise, but I promise it's nothing improper. I'm just asking for an hour of your time." Beatrice dried her hands on her apron, curiosity winning over exhaustion. "All right, let me tell Millicent where I'm going." She ran upstairs and knocked on Millicent's door, explaining quickly. Millicent just smiled. "Go on. Have a good time. Don't worry about what time you get back." Austin had borrowed a wagon from the ranch, and he helped Beatrice up onto the seat with a courtesy that would have done any gentleman proud. They drove out of town, heading north under a sky scattered with stars so bright they seemed close enough to touch. The night air was cold but not bitter, and Beatrice pulled her shawl tight around her shoulders. They drove for about 20 minutes before Austin turned the wagon off the main road, following a trail that led up a gentle rise. At the top of the hill, he stopped the wagon and set the brake, then came around to help Beatrice down. "Close your eyes." "Austin Wells, if this is some kind of trick." "No trick, I promise. Just close your eyes and let me lead you." Beatrice closed her eyes, placing her hand in Austin's and letting him guide her forward. She could hear the wind in the grass, the distant call of a night bird, the sound of Austin's boots on the ground. Then he stopped. "All right. Open them." Beatrice opened her eyes and gasped. They were standing on the top of the hill, and spread out before them was all of Greeley and the plains beyond, the lights of the town like fallen stars scattered across the darkness. Above them, the sky was a river of light, the Milky Way so clear and bright it looked like a road leading to heaven. The mountains were dark silhouettes against the horizon, and the whole world seemed vast and beautiful and impossibly peaceful. "How did you find this place?" "I come up here sometimes when I need to think, when the ranch gets too noisy or the world gets too small." Austin stood beside her, not touching but close enough that she could feel his warmth. "I wanted to share it with you, wanted you to see how beautiful it is out here, how much space there is. You said you came west because you felt trapped. I wanted you to see that you're free now. All of this is yours if you want it." Beatrice felt tears prick her eyes, overwhelmed by the beauty and the thoughtfulness of the gesture. "Thank you. This is perfect." They stood in silence for a while, just watching the stars wheel slowly overhead. Then Austin spoke, his voice quiet but steady. "I need to tell you something before I leave tomorrow. I've been trying to find the right words for weeks, but there aren't any right words. There's just the truth." He turned to face her, his blue eyes dark in the starlight. "I'm falling in love with you, Beatrice Dawson. Maybe I've already fallen. I know it's only been a couple of months, and I know you're still figuring out what you want, but I needed you to know. Needed you to think about it while I'm gone." Beatrice's heart was hammering so hard she thought it might break her ribs. "Austin, you don't have to say anything back. I'm not asking for promises or declarations. I just want you to know that when I come back from Denver, I'm going to ask your permission to court you properly. Not just coffee and conversation, but real courting. Walks on Sunday afternoons, dinners where I meet your friends, letters when we're apart. The whole thing." He reached out and gently tucked a strand of her hair behind her ear, his touch feather light. "And eventually, if you'll have me, I'm going to ask you to marry me. Not because you need someone to take care of you, but because I want to spend my life with you. Because you make me laugh and you challenge me and you make me want to be better than I am. I told you, I don't know how to be a wife." Beatrice's voice was shaking, torn between fear and hope. "I don't know how to do any of this. We'll figure it out together." Austin smiled, echoing his earlier words. "That's what love is, isn't it? Two people figuring out how to build a life together one day at a time. I don't need you to be perfect. I just need you to be willing to try." Beatrice looked up at this cowboy who'd somehow seen past all her defenses, who'd chosen her not despite her rough edges but because of them, and felt something break open inside her chest. "I'm falling in love with you too. It terrifies me, but I am." Austin's smile could have outshone the stars. Yeah, Beatrice laughed, feeling lighter than she had in years. "Come back safe from Denver and we'll figure this out together. I promise." Austin pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her in a hug that felt like coming home. Beatrice let herself lean into him, breathing in his scent, feeling the steady beat of his heart against her cheek. They stood like that for a long time, two people finding each other under the vast Colorado sky, the whole world spread out before them full of possibility. The kiss, when it came, was gentle and sweet, Austin's lips soft against hers, his hand cradling her face like she was something precious. It was Beatrice's first kiss, and it felt like a promise and a beginning all rolled into one perfect moment. They drove back to town slowly, neither wanting the night to end. At the restaurant, Austin helped her down from the wagon and held her hand for a long moment. "I'll be back in a week, probably Sunday or Monday. Don't forget about me while I'm gone." "I don't think I could if I tried." Beatrice squeezed his hand. "Be safe. Watch out for stampedes and river crossings and ornery bulls." "Yes, madam." Austin tipped his hat, his eyes warm with laughter. "Get some sleep. I'll see you soon." Beatrice watched him drive away, her hand raised in farewell, her lips still tingling from the kiss. Inside, she found Millicent waiting with 2 cups of tea and a knowing smile. So. Beatrice sat down, feeling dazed and giddy and terrified all at once. "He's a good man." "I know." "You love him." "I think I do. Is that crazy? We barely know each other." "Time doesn't matter when it's right. I knew I loved my Henry after 3 days. We were married for 37 years before he passed, and every day was a gift." Millicent sipped her tea. "What are you afraid of?" "Everything. Failing at being a wife, disappointing him, losing myself in trying to be what he needs." Beatrice wrapped her hands around the warm cup. "What if I'm not enough? What if you're exactly enough? What if you're everything he needs exactly as you are?" Millicent leaned forward, her eyes serious. "Love isn't about being perfect. It's about being honest and showing up and doing the work even when it's hard. If he loves you, and I believe he does, then he loves all of you. The strong parts and the scared parts and everything in between. He said we'd figure it out together. Then trust him. Trust yourself. Take the leap, Beatrice. Life's too short to let fear steal your happiness." The week Austin was gone felt like a month. Beatrice threw herself into work, trying not to count the days until his return. She baked his favorite apple pie and saved a slice, even though she knew it would be dried out by the time he got back. She read the poetry book he'd given her, finding her favorite verses and marking them to show him. She let herself imagine a future with him. A little house somewhere, a garden, children maybe, a life built together one day at a time. On Sunday evening, just as the dinner service was ending, Austin walked through the door. He was dusty and tired, his clothes stained from travel, but his face lit up when he saw Beatrice. She dropped the plates she was carrying onto the nearest table and flew across the room, not caring who saw, not caring about propriety or proper behavior. Austin caught her in his arms and lifted her clean off her feet, spinning her around while she laughed. "You're back. I'm back. And I brought you something." Austin set her down and pulled a small package from his coat pocket, wrapped in brown paper and string. "Open it." Inside was a cameo brooch, delicate and beautiful, the profile of a woman carved in ivory against a background of pale blue. It was the kind of thing Beatrice had seen in shop windows but never thought she'd own. "Austin, this is too much." "Nothing's too much for you." "I saw it in Denver and thought of you. The lady in the carving reminded me of your profile when you're concentrating on your cooking." Austin fastened it to her collar, his fingers gentle. "There, perfect." Beatrice touched the brooch, feeling tears threaten. "Thank you, it's beautiful." "You're beautiful. I missed you every minute I was gone." Austin took her hands. "I meant what I said before I left. I want to court you properly, with your permission." "You have it. You've had it since the first day you came back for coffee." Beatrice smiled up at him, feeling brave and terrified and more alive than she'd ever felt. "Now sit down and eat something. You look half-starved." The next months were the happiest of Beatrice's life. Austin courted her with a steadiness and devotion that made her feel cherished in a way she'd never experienced. He took her on picnics beside the creek, teaching her to fish and laughing when she shrieked at baiting the hook. He brought her wildflowers even when the season turned cold and they had to ride far to find them. He wrote her letters when he was away with the cattle, pages filled with observations about the land and the weather, and how much he wished she was beside him seeing it all. She learned about his life on the ranch, the hard work and long hours, the danger and the satisfaction. She met his boss, a gruff man named McClintock, who took one look at her and told Austin he'd be a fool to let her get away. She learned that Austin was respected among the other cowboys, known for his fair dealing and his willingness to take the dangerous jobs. The one who'd dive into a river to save a calf or stay up all night with a sick horse. And slowly, carefully, she let him learn about her. About her childhood in Philadelphia, the mother she'd lost too young, the stepfather who'd seen her as a burden to be sold. About her fears and her dreams, her love of cooking and her restlessness, her need for independence and her growing desire to belong to someone who would never try to own her. In November, as the first snows began to dust the mountains, Austin asked her to marry him properly. He did it simply, in the kitchen of the restaurant where they'd first really met, going down on one knee while Beatrice was elbow-deep in bread dough. "Beatrice Dawson, I love you more than I thought it was possible to love another person. You're smart and strong and beautiful, and you make me want to be better every day. I don't have much to offer you except hard work and a cowboy's wages and a heart that's completely yours. But if you'll have me, I promise to spend every day of my life trying to make you happy. Will you marry me?" Beatrice looked down at him, this man who'd seen her at her most guarded and had patiently, gently, helped her learn to trust again. Her hands were covered in flour and her hair was falling out of its pins, and she'd never felt more certain of anything in her life. "Yes, yes, I'll marry you." Austin whooped and stood, lifting her up and spinning her around, getting flour all over his clean shirt and not caring one bit. When he kissed her, Beatrice tasted salt and realized she was crying happy tears that she didn't try to hide. They were married in December, a small ceremony in the church with Millicent and Austin's ranch friends as witnesses. Beatrice wore a simple dress of blue wool that Millicent had helped her make, and Austin wore his Sunday best, his hair slicked back and his boots shined to a high gloss. When the preacher asked if she took this man to be her husband, Beatrice said, "I do," in a voice that rang clear and strong through the small church. The wedding breakfast was held at the restaurant, Millicent insisting on closing for the day to celebrate properly. There was food and laughter and toasts made with apple cider, and through it all Austin kept looking at Beatrice like he couldn't quite believe his luck. She felt the same way, this girl from Philadelphia who'd run west to escape one man and found another who made her believe in love. They spent their wedding night in a room at the hotel, the nicest in Greeley, and Beatrice was nervous until Austin took her hands and promised they'd figure this out together too, just like everything else. And they did, with patience and laughter and tenderness that turned nervousness into joy. Austin had been saving money for years, and together with what Beatrice had put aside, they had enough for a down payment on a small piece of land just outside town. It wasn't much, just 20 acres with a creek running through it and a view of the mountains, but it was theirs. They spent the winter planning, drawing sketches of the house they'd build in the spring, making lists of everything they'd need. Austin continued working at the ranch, But now he came home every night to their rented room above the general store, and Beatrice continued working at the restaurant, saving every penny toward their dream. They were building something together, a life and a future, and every day felt like a gift. In March, when the snow was melting and the first green was showing on the plains, Austin came home with news. McClintock wanted to retire and was offering to sell the Triple Creek Ranch to his top hands. Austin and two other cowboys, good men Beatrice had met and liked, had the chance to become partners if they could raise the money. "It's a risk," Austin told her, pacing their small room while Beatrice sat on the bed. "We'd have to use all our savings and probably take a loan on top of that. It means giving up the land we were planning to buy, at least for now. But Beatrice, it's a real ranch. 3,000 acres of good grazing land, a solid house, barns and corrals already built. We could make a real life there. Raise cattle, maybe horses too. Build something that would last." "What do you want to do?" Beatrice asked, watching his excited pacing. I want it so bad I can taste it, but only if you want it too. This has to be our decision, not just mine." Austin stopped pacing and knelt in front of her. "What do you think?" Beatrice thought about the little piece of land they'd planned to buy, the modest house they'd sketched. Then she thought about the ranch, about the possibility and the challenge and the life they could build there. Austin's partners were good men with wives who'd already welcomed Beatrice into their circle. It would be hard work, risky work, but when had she ever shied away from that? "I think we should do it. I think we should take the chance and build something big and wonderful and completely ours." Beatrice took his face in her hands. "We'll figure it out together, right?" Austin's smile was brilliant. "Together. Always together." They bought the ranch in April, signing the papers in the lawyer's office with shaking hands and hearts full of hope. The Triple Creek Ranch became the property of Austin Wells, Jacob Morrison, and Thomas Fletcher, three young cowboys with big dreams and wives who were just as determined to succeed. They moved into the ranch house, a sprawling building that had enough room for all three families to live separately but share common spaces. Beatrice left the restaurant with Millicent's blessing and tearful hugs, promising to visit often and bring fresh butter and eggs. The ranch house needed work, years of bachelor living having left it shabby and neglected, but Beatrice threw herself into making it a home. She scrubbed and painted, sewed curtains and planted a garden, turned the kitchen into a bright, welcoming space that smelled of fresh bread and coffee. The work was hard, harder than anything Beatrice had done before. She learned to milk cows and churn butter, to preserve vegetables and smoke meat, to do laundry in a tub outside and hang it on lines that stretched across the yard. She learned to shoot, Austin teaching her patiently until she could hit a target at 50 yards, saying every ranch wife needed to know how to defend herself and her home. But she also learned the joys of ranch life. The satisfaction of watching things grow, whether it was her garden or the cattle herd or the bank account that slowly, steadily grew as they sold beef and horses. The community of the other ranch wives, Sarah Morrison and Emma Fletcher, who became her close friends and confidants. The beauty of the land, the way the light changed with the seasons, the vast sky that made her feel both small and infinite all at once. And there was Austin, her husband, her partner, her best friend. They worked side by side, figuring out the rhythms of marriage and ranching together. They had arguments, fierce ones sometimes, about money or decisions or the 100 little things that come up when two independent people try to build a life together. But they always came back to each other, always remembered that they were on the same team, always chose love over pride. In the evenings after the work was done, they'd sit on the porch and watch the sun set over the mountains, Austin's arm around her shoulders, her head on his chest. They'd talk about the day, about the plans for tomorrow, about nothing and everything. And Beatrice would think about how far she'd come from that desperate girl who'd stepped off the stagecoach with nothing but a carpetbag and a letter to a dead woman. And she'd feel grateful for every hard choice that had led her here. Their first year on the ranch was challenging but successful. The cattle herd grew, the horses they bred sold well, and the three families learned to work together smoothly. The partnership between Austin, Jacob, and Thomas proved strong, each man bringing different skills and strengths that complemented each other perfectly. In January 1880, Beatrice discovered she was pregnant. She told Austin one evening after supper, nervous despite herself about how he'd react. His joy was immediate and overwhelming, picking her up and spinning her around before remembering himself and setting her down gently, apologizing for jostling her. "Are you happy?" she asked, searching his face. "Happy? Beatrice, I'm over the moon. We're going to have a baby, our baby." Austin placed his hand on her still flat stomach with wonder. "You're going to be an amazing mother. I don't know anything about babies. We'll figure it out together." Austin pulled her close, and Beatrice laughed at his echo of the words that had become their motto. "Just like we've figured out everything else." The pregnancy was difficult at times, morning sickness that lasted all day, exhaustion that made the simplest tasks feel impossible. But Sarah and Emma helped, taking over the heaviest chores and bringing Beatrice meals when she couldn't face the kitchen. Austin hovered like a worried mother hen, trying to do everything for her until Beatrice firmly told him she was pregnant, not an invalid, and could still function. Their son was born in September 1880, a healthy baby boy with Austin's blue eyes and a set of lungs that announced his arrival to the entire ranch. They named him William Thomas Wells, after Austin's father and Thomas Fletcher, whose quick ride for the doctor had probably saved Beatrice's life when the birth turned difficult. Holding William for the first time, Beatrice felt a love so fierce and overwhelming it brought tears to her eyes. This tiny person, this perfect combination of her and Austin, was theirs to raise and protect and love. Austin sat beside her on the bed, his arm around her shoulders, his finger caught in William's tiny fist, and his face held an expression of such wonder that Beatrice fell in love with him all over again. "You did so good," Austin whispered, kissing her forehead. "You're amazing. He's amazing. I love you both so much. We made a person," Beatrice said, still awed by the miracle of it. "An actual person who didn't exist before and now does. Best thing we've ever made together. Better than bread, even." Austin's joke made Beatrice laugh, and William stirred at the sound, his little face scrunching up before settling back into sleep. Motherhood transformed Beatrice in ways she hadn't expected. She'd worried she wouldn't know what to do, but instinct and love proved stronger than inexperience. She nursed William and sang to him, walked the floor with him when he cried, marveled at every tiny change as he grew. Austin was a devoted father, coming in from the range to hold his son, changing diapers without complaint, staying up on difficult nights so Beatrice could rest. The ranch continued to prosper. By 1882, they'd paid off half the loan and added more land. The three families had established themselves as reliable ranchers, their reputation for quality cattle and honest dealing spreading throughout Colorado. They'd survived droughts and hard winters, market fluctuations and disease, pulling together and supporting each other through every challenge. William grew into a bright, energetic toddler who loved following his father around the ranch, his little legs churning to keep up with Austin's long strides. Beatrice would watch them from the kitchen window, her heart full of love for these two males who'd given her life meaning she'd never imagined. In the spring of 1883, Beatrice found herself pregnant again. This time she was less nervous, more confident in her ability to handle what was coming. Their daughter was born in December, a tiny girl with dark hair and Beatrice's determined chin. They named her Rose Elizabeth, and William was instantly smitten with his baby sister, wanting to help with everything from bathing to feeding. The years flowed by in a rhythm of seasons and growth. William started school in Greeley, riding in with Thomas Fletcher's oldest son and spending his days learning reading and arithmetic. Rose proved to be as spirited as her mother, refusing to be left behind when her brother had adventures, demanding to be included in everything. Austin built them a separate house on the ranch property in 1885, a wedding gift he'd been planning and saving for, and Beatrice cried when she saw it. This beautiful home that was entirely theirs, built with Austin's own hands. The ranch thrived beyond any of their initial hopes. They'd become one of the most successful operations in northern Colorado, their cattle sought after and their horses prized. Austin and his partners had proved that three men with limited resources but unlimited determination could build something lasting. More than that, they'd built a community, a place where families could grow and thrive and support each other. Millicent came to visit often, proud as any grandmother of William and Rose. She'd sold the restaurant and retired, spending her days visiting friends and spoiling other people's children. She'd tell anyone who'd listen about how she'd watched Beatrice and Austin fall in love over bread and coffee, how she'd known from the first they were meant for each other. In the summer of 1887, Beatrice and Austin celebrated their 8th wedding anniversary with a picnic by the creek that ran through their property. William was 7 and Rose was 3, both of them playing in the water while their parents sat on a blanket in the shade. Beatrice leaned against Austin, watching their children and feeling a contentment so deep it was almost painful. "Happy?" Austin asked, his arm around her waist. "So happy I can hardly believe it's real sometimes. I keep thinking I'll wake up and find myself back in Philadelphia, and all of this will have been a dream." Beatrice turned to look at her husband, this man who'd seen her at her most afraid and loved her anyway. "Thank you for not giving up on me. For waiting while I figured out how to be brave enough to love you back. You were always brave. You just needed someone to remind you." Austin kissed her, gentle and sweet, the kind of kiss that still made her heart race after 8 years of marriage. "I love you, Beatrice Wells. I loved you when you were covered in flour and scowling at me. I loved you when you told me you didn't know how to be a wife. I loved you through every moment of learning together, and I'll love you through all the moments still to come. We figured it out, didn't we? All the things I was so afraid I couldn't do, we figured them out together." Beatrice smiled, thinking of that terrified girl who'd stepped off the stagecoach 9 years ago. "I used to think love meant losing yourself, becoming someone else to fit what another person needed. But with you, I learned that real love means being more yourself than you've ever been. You made me braver and stronger and happier than I knew was possible. You did the same for me. Before you, I was just drifting, working and saving money but never really building toward anything. You gave me purpose, gave me a reason to want more, to dream bigger." Austin pulled her closer. "Everything good in my life started the day you scowled at me in that kitchen and told me you weren't looking for a husband." They laughed together, remembering, and William looked up from the creek. "What's funny, Mama? Just remembering how your papa and I met, how we were both trying so hard not to fall in love and did it anyway." Beatrice held out her arms and William came running, dripping water everywhere as he climbed onto the blanket. Rose followed, demanding to be included, and soon they were all tangled together in a laughing, wet heap. This was everything Beatrice had never dared to hope for. A home, a family, a partnership built on trust and love and the willingness to figure things out together. She'd come west running from one man, who'd seen her as property, and found another who'd seen her as a partner. Austin had never asked her to be anything but herself, had loved her rough edges and her fierce independence, had shown her that marriage didn't mean losing yourself, but finding someone who helped you become more fully who you were meant to be. The ranch continued to grow, and so did their family. Beatrice gave birth to twins in 1889, 2 boys they named Henry and James, who kept her busy and laughing with their mischief. William grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved books as much as ranching, talking about going to university someday to study agriculture and bring new techniques back to the ranch. Rose proved to be a natural with horses, fearless and skilled beyond her years, already able to ride better than most of the ranch hands. Austin's hair started showing silver at the temples, and Beatrice found her first gray hair and laughed instead of panicking, because they were growing older together, and that was a gift. They'd built something that would last beyond them, in the ranch and in their children, in the community they'd helped create. On their 15th anniversary in December 1894, Austin surprised Beatrice with a trip, just the 2 of them, leaving the children with Sarah and Emma. They went back to the hill where he'd first told her he loved her, driving the same wagon under the same stars. Everything had changed and nothing had changed. The land was still vast and beautiful, the sky still scattered with stars that looked close enough to touch. "Remember what I said the first time I brought you here?" Austin asked, his arm around her against the cold December night. "You said I was free, that all of this was mine if I wanted it. And did you? Did you take it?" "I took more than I ever dreamed I could have." Beatrice looked up at the stars, thinking of their 5 children sleeping safely at home, their ranch thriving, their life together rich and full. "I took everything, and it's been more wonderful than I could have imagined. I'm glad, because you've given me everything too. You've made me happier than I knew a person could be." Austin turned her face toward his blue eyes still the same summer storm color that had caught her attention 16 years ago. "I love you, Beatrice. I'll love you until the stars fall from the sky and beyond." "We'll figure it out together," Beatrice said, and kissed him under the vast Colorado sky, this cowboy who'd seen past her fear to the brave woman underneath, who'd loved her enough to be patient while she learned to love him back, who'd shown her that the best things in life were the ones you built together, one day at a time. The years continued to roll by in their steady rhythm. William went to the university in Boulder as he'd dreamed, studying agricultural science and bringing home ideas that helped make the ranch even more successful. Rose married young, to a cowboy much like her father, and settled on a piece of the ranch her parents gave her as a wedding present. The twins grew into strong young men who loved the land and the work, taking over more and more of the daily operations as Austin's back started protesting the long days in the saddle. Beatrice's hair turned gray and then white, but her hands never lost their skill in the kitchen. She taught her daughters-in-law and her granddaughters how to make bread, passing down the lessons Austin had learned in that restaurant kitchen so long ago. She told them stories about coming west with nothing but hope and a letter to a dead woman, about meeting a blue-eyed cowboy who'd been patient enough to wait while she learned to trust, about building a life together through determination and love. Austin's joints grew stiff and his hair went completely silver, but his love for Beatrice never dimmed. He still brought her wildflowers when he could, still looked at her like she was the most beautiful woman in the world, still told her every day that marrying her was the best decision he'd ever made. They celebrated their 30th anniversary surrounded by children and grandchildren. The ranch house, overflowing with family. That night, alone in their room, Beatrice looked at this man who'd been her partner for 3 decades and felt the same flutter in her chest she'd felt that first time their eyes had met across a restaurant kitchen. "We did good, didn't we?" she asked, lying in his arms in the darkness. "We did better than good. We built a life together, raised good kids who are raising good kids of their own, created something that will last long after we're gone." Austin kissed her forehead, his lips warm against her skin. "And we did it all together, just like I promised we would. I was so scared at the beginning, so sure I'd fail at being a wife, at being a mother, at all of it. You never failed at anything. You just succeeded in your own way, which was better than any conventional way could have been." Austin's voice was soft in the darkness. "You showed me what true partnership looks like. What it means to face life as equals, to support each other, to grow together instead of growing apart. You made me a better man, Beatrice. You made me a braver woman. You taught me that love doesn't trap you, it sets you free." Beatrice snuggled closer, listening to his heartbeat, steady and strong. "I love you, Austin Wells. Thank you for being patient with that scared girl in the kitchen who didn't know how to let anyone love her. Thank you for being brave enough to let me try." Austin held her close, and they fell asleep like that, the same way they'd fallen asleep for 30 years, together in the darkness with the whole world outside and home right there in each other's arms. The ranch continued through generations, the Triple Creek becoming known throughout Colorado as one of the oldest and most respected family operations in the state. Long after Austin and Beatrice were gone, their great-grandchildren would tell the story of how it all started with a frightened young woman stepping off a stagecoach and a patient cowboy who saw past her fear to the strength underneath, who loved her enough to wait while she learned to love herself, who promised they'd figure it out together and kept that promise every day of their lives. But on that December night, their 30th anniversary, none of that had happened yet. They were just two people who'd found each other against all odds, who'd built a life together through hard work and determination and love, who'd proved that the best things in life are the ones you create together, one day at a time, one moment at a time, one choice at a time, to keep choosing each other no matter what comes. And as they slept, the stars wheeled overhead in their ancient dance, and the wind whispered across the plains, and the creek ran through the land they'd made their own, and everything was exactly as it should be. A life well lived, a love well earned, a promise kept. Together, always together, just like they'd said from the very beginning.